let me ask you something. Who are you? Really think about it. That feeling of self, it feels like it's 100% you, right? So personal. But what if it's not? What if that very idea of who you are is actually built from a kind of blueprint? A blueprint that your culture handed to you without you even realizing it. So let's just get right to it. I'll ask you straight up. Who are you? No, seriously, if you had to sit down and actually describe yourself, where would you even start? Well, before we can even begin to tackle a question that big, we kind of have to break it down. We need to look at the basic building blocks of what we call identity. Okay, so first up, there's something called your self-concept. The easiest way to think about it is it's the story you tell yourself about yourself. It's all those beliefs you have rattling around in your head, what you think you're good at, what you're kind of terrible at, your big goals. It's your own personal headline. But we don't just have a story, do we? We're constantly judging it. And that's where self-esteem comes in. It's the grade you give your own story. So it's not just, I play the piano. It's, I'm a pretty good pianist, and that makes me feel good about myself. See the difference? It's the value you put on those qualities. Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. Because it turns out those building blocks we just talked about, they're not the same for everyone, not even close. Culture basically hands us one of two very, very different blueprints for how to build a self. You've got the independent self on one side. That's the model you'll see a lot in Western cultures. And on the other side, you've got the interdependent self, which is much more common in many Eastern, Southern European, and Latin American cultures. And let me tell you, these two blueprints create fundamentally different ways of being a person. All right, so let's break down the independent self. Think of it like this. You are your own little self-contained universe. You're separate, you're unique, and you're defined by all the stuff that's inside you. Your personality, your goals, your special skills. The whole point, really, is to stand out from the crowd, to be your own person. Now, flip that completely on its head, and you get the interdependent self. With this blueprint, the self doesn't even really make sense on its own. It only becomes whole, only becomes meaningful when it's connected to other people. You aren't defined by what makes you stand out, but by your connections, as a son, as a friend, as a team member. Who you are is your role within the group. So if you boil it all down, it's this. For one, the fundamental goal in life is to be unique. For the other, it's to belong. Okay, so what? Why does any of this matter? Well, this isn't just some abstract theory. This cultural blueprint you're working from, it shapes literally everything about you, how you think, what you feel, what gets you out of bed in the morning. And these differences run deep. I mean, let's go back to self-esteem. If you have an independent self, you feel good about yourself when you express who you are, when you show off your unique skills. But for an interdependent self, self-worth comes from something totally different. It's about your ability to fit in, to hold back when you need to keep the peace within the group. We're talking about two completely different ways to feel good about yourself. It even changes the emotions we feel most often. It's like our culture gives us a script for which feelings are important. If you're coming from that independent viewpoint, you're probably more familiar with ego-focused emotions, things like pride or anger or frustration. Feelings that are all about me. But in interdependent cultures, the focus is more on other focused emotions, the ones that are all about our connection to other people. Here's a great example, the Japanese word amai. It's this beautiful feeling of being totally lovingly cared for by someone and being able to depend on them. It's a huge part of building relationships in Japan. But guess what? There's no single word for it in English. Why? Because that specific feeling just isn't as central to an independent worldview. And you can see how knowing things like this is absolutely crucial if you're working or building relationships with people from different cultures. It shows you what they truly value. And this totally changes what motivates us. In the West, we're often driven by self-enhancement, right? We want to feel good about ourselves, see ourselves in a positive light. But in a place like Japan, the drive is often towards self-criticism. And look, this isn't about beating yourself up. It's about seeing where you can improve for the sake of the team, for the good of the group. Think about how massive that difference is in a business setting, especially when it comes to things like teamwork or performance reviews. But hold on, it's not quite as simple as just an East versus West thing. Because within any culture, there's another major player shaping our sense of self, and that's gender. So feminist theorists came along and said, hey, wait a minute. This whole focus on being a totally separate, autonomous individual, that doesn't fit everyone's experience. They propose this idea of a relational self. And the argument is that for a lot of people, especially women, the self is actually built around connections in relationships. It's a big shift away from that idea of being a walled-off, separate person. And what's so powerful about this relational model is the idea that we don't grow by ourselves in a vacuum. We grow through our connections with others. And when those relationships have real mutual empathy, you get these 5 incredible outcomes. You feel more energized, you feel more empowered to go out and do things. You actually understand yourself and the other person better. Your self-worth goes up, and you actually want more connection. It's like a positive feedback loop. Okay, so all of this brings us to one last really important idea, because depending on which blueprint for the self you're using, the very definition of what it means to grow as a person completely changes. We can basically split this into 2 camps, personal growth versus inner growth. One is all about the ego, and the other is about leaving the ego behind. So personal growth, which is super common in the West, is about building a stronger ego, a more unique individual. A great example is something like cognitive behavioral therapy. But inner growth, which you see at the heart of many Eastern spiritual traditions like yoga or Zen, has the exact opposite goal. The aim there is to go beyond the ego, to actually dissolve that feeling of being a separate person. So let's put it as simply as possible. One path is about building a bigger, better, stronger me. The other path is about realizing that me was just a story we were telling ourselves, and that by letting it go, we can find a much deeper, more connected, true self. So, that leaves us with a big question for you to think about. When you look at your own life, at your own goals, which path are you on? Are you trying to build a stronger self, or are you trying to move beyond it?